Russia, Iran, Turkey are all working together to find a political solution to the conflict in Syria. Officials from the three countries meeting today in Moscow. This comes as Syrian activists say only about 3,000 rebels and civilians have actually been evacuated from eastern Aleppo so far. Thousands remain trapped. John Huddy's live for us from our Middle East Bureau.
Turkey has claimed the desperate operation to evacuate thousands of Syrians from eastern Aleppo could be complicated by Wednesday. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu tweeted Tuesday that 37,500 people have been evacuated from the war-torn city so far. He added that all evacuations are intended to be finished by tomorrow.
All weekend long, buses and ambulances carried refugees out of Aleppo, Syria, that city now in shambles as the president of Syria, Bashar Assad, claims a victory over the rebel faction. The Damascus government pledging that by Monday night's end, the entire rebel faction would be moved out of Aleppo, Syria, the largest city in the nation. And just hours later, Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, says he's had a phone call with the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, as those two client state nations and those two allied nations there try and determine the future of the outcome in Syria. Those conversations, of course, taking place without a diplomat from the State Department here in the U.S. For some commentary on the role of the United States in Syria, we're turning now to a former presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, Austin Peterson, who ran against Gary Johnson in the primary. Joined us earlier in our broadcast. Austin, good to have you back with us briefly on this foreign policy topic.
The UN Security Council is set to approve a mission to monitor the evacuation of eastern Aleppo, with the voting due to start in less than 1 hour. This follows a number of terror attacks on buses that were destined to pick up civilians from Syrian villages. RT's Lizzie Phelan is in a refugee camp which accepts people from those villages. She joins us live right now.
Thanks for having me.
A lot of commentators are weighing in on the tragedy, the atrocities of Aleppo, and certainly there's no shortage of human suffering taking place there. But many Republicans are criticizing President Obama, saying he didn't do enough. He didn't stay true to his word. We're talking back years ago now to this red line in Syria, where President Obama said if you use chemical weapons against your own people, you're going to have to face the full might and fury of the American military. That didn't happen.
Well, Lizzie, despite attacks there, some civilians do manage to get to the refugee camp where you are. Just bring us up to date how the evacuation is proceeding.
Well, so far, an official at this camp tells us that 260 people from Fua and Kafreya, those two villages, largely populated with people who are sympathetic to the Syrian government, that have been under siege now by rebel forces for almost 2 years.
Now we have Russia stepping up, Iran having an increased role. Do you, as a libertarian, do you view that moment, the not crossing the red line, as a failing of the Obama administration?
Well, it is a classic military mistake. I mean, President Obama would have done well to read Sun Tzu's Art of War before he committed American resources to the region. And I think that he probably would have done better if he had taken a page out of Ronald Reagan's playbook. You know, and there was a bombing of the U.S. Marine Force base in Lebanon, and Ronald Reagan pulled the troops out and said that we didn't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics.
In the province of Idlib, they've been brought here to this shelter in Jibrin on the outskirts of Aleppo. That official tells us that he expects a total of 1,000 people from Fua and Kafreya to be brought here today, and they're being evacuated as part of the agreement to see the last militants, their families and civilians evacuated from that last rebel pocket.
I mean, quite frankly, I think that the problem lies in an ignorance on behalf of policymakers, the differences of the regions, where you have people, a wide diversity of opinions on this, from President Obama to Senator Rand Paul, who believes that we should be arming the Kurds. Of course, and then we have no clue whether or not that would backfire on us. Congressman Ron Paul in 2008 ran a presidential campaign, became very popular based on espousing a theory called blowback, which he actually got from the CIA.
However, the International Committee of the Red Cross has put the number of evacuees since Thursday at 25,000. The organization said the operation is still ongoing. As part of the same deal, the ICRC said a further 750 people have so far been evacuated from the villages of Foua and Kafraya in Syria's mainly rebel-held Idlib province.
In East Aleppo, those evacuations in Aleppo today continuing, and if it's completed, that will mark the official end of the battle for Aleppo and put the Syrian army in total control of the city.
Which he actually got from the CIA. And the idea is that when you meddle in these Middle Eastern countries, quite frequently there will be attacks in the United States. We've seen that happen in Garland, Texas, for example, where there was an ISIS attack, an ISIS-inspired attack on a Dra Muhammad rally here in the United States. So frequently what will happen is that while we meddle in these conflicts overseas, the tragedy of the conflict will eventually come here to the homeland. And what's happening in Aleppo, Syria is an absolute humanitarian crisis. 300,000 people have died. Since the inception of conflicts there, we were very close to brokering a ceasefire there. John Kerry has been very involved in the region, trying to broker a peace between the Russians, the rebels, and between all of the other factions that are involved. But of course, you have Lebanon's Hezbollah. You've got Iran involved in shoring up Assad's hold on power. And so you have quite a few great powers that are balancing off one another. Of course, you reported it earlier in your broadcast that there was an assassination, the assassination by a Turkish nationalist, the Russian ambassador to Turkey. And this was this is the kind of event that could be that Gavrilo Princip moment.
But today we've been speaking to people from Foua and Kafraya. It's the largest group of people that have been able to leave those villages since the siege there began in March 2015. And the conditions that they describe in those villages surrounded by rebel forces are absolutely terrible.
So you're saying basically if the American military had stepped in 2011, that could have been the U.S. ambassador today, some nationalist person supporting.
Right, exactly. Of course, look what happened, the tragedy that happened in Libya to our ambassador, and the responsibility for that falls directly on the shoulders of President Obama and Hillary Clinton, who advocated for the bombing of Libya, the toppling of Gaddafi, and subsequently the assassination due to the security breaches that occurred there. So I fear Russia, the American involvement, especially with the type of rhetoric that President Obama is espousing right now, where he's being much more bellicose towards President Vladimir Putin for alleged hacking or alleged interference in the American elections. It's the kind of thing where, libertarians are looking at this saying, well, you can't get out of the door soon enough, because it seems that Donald Trump is much more willing to deal with the Russians.
They describe a complete lack of food, medical supplies. The water that they have access to is dirty. There's no phone communications, no internet, and they're living under a constant barrage of shelling by opposition militants. Some of the people we've spoken to say that in just one day they have fired at them over 200 mortar bombs.
And certainly right now we would be much better served by having a positive relationship with Russia, due to the fact that they are now backing up Assad. We are now on the opposite side of Russia. So I think that there is a good chance that with the new president, with the new transition, we might have a better chance for peace in the Middle East.
All right.
For sure, many of the people that have left today relieved to have got out, but it's a bittersweet feeling for them, because only injured people, women and small children are being allowed to leave. So those who have come here have had to leave behind their families, and they have no way of staying in touch with them. And they're urging that all of the population, all of the people inside Fur and Kafraya be allowed to leave immediately.
RT's Lizzie Phelan there reporting on the progress of those evacuations from Aleppo.